Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight's show is a roundtable discussion with two very special guests and friends, Cara St. Louis and Pamela Tartar. Cara is the editor of the online magazine Vortex Conscious and Courageous. She is also the author of the fabulous book, The Sun Thief, which is available at Amazon.com. Pamela Tartar is the host of her popular internet radio shows, which are broadcast on Pure Momentum Network, which is owned and operated by Pamela and her husband David. Tonight's show is 2 hours of wide-ranging discussion. We start our conversation talking about the plague of political correctness, and then moving into human consciousness, the effects of engineered global chaos, the need for critical mass to turn things around, how voices within the alternative movement are succumbing to celebrity, how Zionism is being exposed, the militarized response in Ferguson, and finishing with our final thoughts on getting humanity to awaken. Cara St. Louis kicks things off for us by explaining how the recent revelation of the Muslim pedophilia in the UK was ignored due to political correctness, especially amongst the authorities. Let's take a listen.
Sorting all of that out is a mess, number one. But what stands out for me, and we need to make sure that everybody gets a look at this, is that it's the political correctness that's admitted to in the major newspapers as what defined the fact that it wasn't reported. The self-policing of our thoughts have to do with being politically correct. It's taken about a century for that to happen, but now we can't make a move in our own minds without asking ourselves, are we willing to pay the price of being thought of as a racist? It's the worst possible fate that can befall us at this point, at least in our minds it is. So the fact that they're coming out and admitting this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to point up how powerful this control mechanism is, and that we need to stop. Part of what's going on is that we no longer are in touch with what I would call a universal natural law. There is one. It guides all of humanity. It's very simple, and it's really the difference between right and wrong. But in a very complex sort of history, beginning with not the Tavistock Institute in this case, but the Frankfurt School, we have been taught. And well, actually, let me take that back, because it actually is a little bit complex at its beginning. And believe it or not, we can trace it back to the early anthropologists, whose job it was to politicize the cultural revolution, social engineering toward getting cultural revolutions underway. And what they did was convince us all that we don't share anything in common. There is no common thread in humanity, anything that we share. In fact, the only thing that we share are our differences, and therefore we cannot speak to each other. We have no way of understanding each other except through this prescription of dialogue that they've given us. And that's how PC came about in a nutshell. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but that was essentially the beginnings of it. And what it did was shatter us in a million pieces, and make it such that we really did believe that we couldn't talk to each other, that we had nothing in common, and the only thing that mattered were our differences. There was nothing common about our humanity. That turns us against each other in a very big way.
In the Old Testament, the Tower of Babel, that's what we are told happened, is our tongues were confused, so we couldn't understand one another. So that does go all the way back. Why? Because vocabulary and the way we communicate with each other is very important. Of course, to do it originally and naturally would be telepathically, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree with you completely. And in fact, I've just had some conversations surrounding this very thing that you just brought up, Pamela. The idea that this engineering that's been done to us, and I firmly believe that we've been monkeyed with somewhere along the way. Many alternative researchers are putting that theory forward. Means that we've been disconnected from our ability to telepathically communicate, and there's this sort of wall, if you will, now there that forces us to use our words in ways that we probably were never meant to use them. Now they're how we create on this planet. It's our magic. I absolutely believe that. It's part of how we are co-creators. but there's been something put between us and our original ability to communicate, which, yes, Pamela, I think you're absolutely right. It's telepathic.
Well, I have to stick this in now. I do not go along with those that say that we have been changed. I believe, I know that there is a protection around our DNA that cannot be messed with, but what has been messed with is our amazing ability to create in our thought world. And
Mm-hmm.
that is where we've been manipulated, is in our imagination and in our
Mm-hmm.
thought world. They cannot, in my study and in my awareness, they cannot, and the they is the opposition to all life. They
Right.
cannot mess with our DNA because our creators made us with a protection, so that cannot be done. So I believe that that is another, no, I know that in my awareness that is another lie that has been perpetrated, and a lot of people are accepting.
Well, I would hope that that's true, Pamela, and I tend to believe what you have to say because I know that you're connected in some very, very important ways. Because, and here's why I hope that that's absolutely true. Because part of what's happening through chemtrails, through the nanoparticles of heavy metals and all of those things that we are bioaccumulating in our body, supposedly, is that it is disrupting our DNA, our RNA actually, and so we are replicating broken strands. And so, if in fact our DNA is protected, I mean, how would you see those two things going together? Do they just not equal up?
Well, I'm not real sure how that goes together. I know that I do know that the aerosol war is real.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it is affecting us physically and mentally, lots of ways. But
Right.
I do know that we do have a protection, and I really know that because I have been abducted most of my life, and
Mm-hmm.
I have not shared this on shows, but I also had babies for these people, for
Oh,
these beings, and they cannot do it. It does, this entity that is produced does not have an emotional body, does not have a spiritual body. It cannot be done. I
right.
know, I was there.
Right.
7 years later, they hand me a child and say, start her emotionally. And I
Uh-huh.
did my best. I know how to do that.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I can't. There is nothing there to start. There is
Right.
no emotional body. So I know that certain things cannot be done that we're told can be done. And
Well,
I
that's a
know,
whole show.
yes, I know that through my own life experience.
Okay, so maybe the protection, and God bless, this, hopefully this is absolutely true, and I believe you. Maybe the protection is that part of our DNA that's actually ascending, that's actually transforming.
Well, there's so much of our DNA that is considered junk
Right.
because they can't figure out what it is, or
Mm-hmm.
they don't want us to know
Right,
what it
right.
is.
Yeah, there's
But
no such thing as junk DNA.
oh,
No, how
absolutely
could
not.
there be?
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It can't be done. It can't be passed on. And
Yeah.
so when they set up this alien, it created us and all of this stuff, it's just another story like the Messiah complex. So that if somebody has to come back and save us, they can choose Jesus, they can choose Muhammad, or they can choose our alien brothers or creators. Any
Yeah.
of those, it's the
Hmm.
same story, and it's all lies,
Hmm.
in my opinion and
Okay.
awareness.
See, the
So
way,
let's
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Mike.
I
Sorry.
was going
No.
to say, no, the way I view it is I kind of steer away from these types of discussions only because, it winds up, some people believe a certain thing and others believe
Mm-hmm.
something else. So when people ask me that question, when they pose it to me, I say, look, it's like this. What they're doing is they're tinkering with the vehicle being your physical body, which includes your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is your soul comes in, and when your soul comes in, your body's supposed to be the perfect vehicle for your soul. Your soul's all creativity and imagination, it's love and so on. But
Right.
what they do is they break that vehicle down. It's like telling somebody, look, I want you to drive 3,000 miles cross country.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a good driver. You're very physically able and capable. And they say to you, but what we're going to do is we're going to flatten your tires.
Mm-hmm.
we're going to put some sugar in your gas tank and we want you to drive 3,000 miles. Now, you might make it there, but it's going to be a very difficult and rough ride. So at least the perspective I put it in when we talk about what's going on, that's how I kind of build that analogy. Think of your body as a car, as that vehicle with the 4 flat tires. Well, that's what they're trying to do to everybody so that they make the whole trip, the whole journey, when you come in as a soul, as difficult as it possibly can. And quite frankly, many times souls, they lose control or they have a difficult time navigating the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people don't like to admit that, but just look around us and you can see that, it's probably proof positive that a lot of people have lost control of their vehicle.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Mike.
Okay.
That's true. And in addition to that, Mike, not only do we have flat tires, but the opposition has learned to use our power, our imagination, to entrain us that things are broken that are not broken.
Right.
And so if I have been tortured and traumatized to believe that my left arm doesn't work, then my left arm doesn't work.
Right.
So I don't try to use that left arm. And so what I am aware of is that the entities, the opposition has found out what our power is, and that is our own mind and our own imagination and creativity, and has used that against us. It's not what they can do to us, it's what they have entrained us to do to ourselves.
Exactly.
Right. And they've indoctrinated people to believe that you can't do anything about this. It's not within your control. Right. You're helpless. And then people buy into that and they become helpless.
I haven't really got the details yet, but I'm looking into this later today or this week sometime, and I will share it with you. But apparently there was some sort of study coming out. Maybe you guys already know about this. Help me if you do. There's a study that's come out of Stanford, perhaps, that in the 50s, maybe the early 50s, that was an evaluation of the power of our imaginations, the human imagination. And somehow, now I'm not clear on the details, as I said, because I've just come up against this today, but somehow this report made it to Congress and scared the Congress so badly because they realized what could happen if people understood their own power finally, that they buried it. So have you heard anything along those lines?
I have not.
I haven't heard of it either, but I know it cannot be measured, but I'm sure they can get close to it.
Yeah. So when I come up with that data, and of course you have to realize it's coming out of Stanford, but Stanford, this is that would be the kind of thing that they would try to measure,
right?
So that they could figure out how to exploit it,
right?
Or bury it.
The biggest tool I have to use against the opposition to all life is my imagination, and I do my best to encourage people to use their imagination, because if you don't use it, someone else will use it, and it will not be in your favor.
That's right.
And that, in my opinion, that is what has happened to humanity. Is we have actually been entrained to hurt ourselves.
We have.
Well, how many times have you heard people say, I have no imagination, I'm not creative?
I know.
Right.
I know. And that's impossible.
It's impossible.
It's not possible.
But they believe it.
I know. We've got to come back from that.
I know.
Immediately. And I think we will.
Well, we've just got to encourage each other to be creative. And, when we come up against people who think they aren't creative, we can talk to them about how they are creative, because we all are. Everyone is. And, when you start working with people in the alternative areas, you always find musicians. You always find, writers. You find the creative people. And, of course, everyone's creative, but these people are actually using their creativity.
Right. And so, sort of embracing it.
And so consciousness comes more easily to them.
Well, I know that when I first put Vortex up, I just recently, just back to the PC for just ever so briefly, You guys both know, you've looked at this site. It's very clear that I'm not tolerating PC. I'm trying very hard not to tolerate PC, and I put it right on the front page. We will be insulting your isms. Count on it. Please don't bring PC here unless it's a matter of life and death, that kind of stuff. But my friend Mark McCandlish put up an article, or donated an article to the cause, on the feasibility of interstellar travel. It was long. It was well done. It was pure Mark, and I proudly put it up. And the very first response I got to this article was from someone I know very well, who said, "You've used the word mankind. Don't you realize how sexist that is? Please don't do that." And I thought, oh, real. This is what you got from that wonderful article. And all the universe that he just put in front of you, the tool of political correctness has just put you right there and locked you.
Isn't that amazing?
That's a perfect example of what I said, Cara. No one was outside this person doing this. He did this, or she did this inside themselves.
Indeed. That was just the lock on the door, just flame shut right behind her. And I thought, you got nothing else out of that article. How is that possible?
Well, it's interesting. Before we started the recording, Pamela, you had mentioned that they believe they have us over a barrel,
Yes.
And it's examples like that which leads them to believe that they do indeed have people over a barrel, because you can read this brilliant article by Mark talking about interstellar travel and, the capabilities, and perhaps, many believe they were already doing it. So you read this entire great article, and the only thing you can say is, you didn't use humankind, you used mankind. Please be politically correct.
I know.
Right?
That actually
Unbelievable.
That was the day I started putting big notices up on the front page. It's like, please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Or go
read something else.
Well, back in the 70s, when I was having lots of communications with spirit teachers and entities from other dimensions, I said, this is impossible because our vocabulary will not allow what we need to say, because when you're communicating telepathically, you get these huge packets of stuff, and there's really no focusing on vocabulary. You just get this packet of information and you just have it. And then here, in order for us to give it to each other in our current state of consciousness, we must use vocabulary. And I said, this is impossible. This is totally impossible. It can't be done, And I was told, it is very difficult.
It is.
It's going to be difficult. But as you come into more consciousness, the other human beings will be coming into their accelerated consciousness, and telepathic communication will happen as you speak words. And so I was even told, I did a computer tech job that was a call center. I talked to a lot of people, and I was told by spirit teachers that just the vibration of my voice would awaken people.
Interesting.
Now think about that.
Yeah.
If we're conscious to a certain level, just the we could be talking about cats and dogs, and it will awaken something because of the vibration in your voice. And I saw that happen. I have experienced that. It is phenomenal. So we are not without power. We are not over that barrel. Yes, some of us are. Some of us are, because some of us are not the same as others of us, as far as what we have, as far as the equipment and the potential. But there are enough of us to make a difference. I know that with a capital K.
Right. Well, there are a couple. First of all, I want to drop a name here for your listeners and for you guys. You've probably heard of a fellow called R.A. Schwaller de Lubitz, who was an alchemist in the early 20th century to mid 20th century, and worked extensively on the Egyptian pyramids. And I'm reading some stuff of his right now because it's very helpful in terms of understanding the logos, understanding the transmission of symbolism, and understanding this whole idea of naming, Pamela, which you've talked about, which is actually, for people like yourself, a painful kind of thing. And well, really it is. And it's not the first time I've heard this, and I kind of understand it a little bit in my own life, but I have a very dear friend who talks about, very, very dear friend who I'm not ever going to name, but she talks about having been taken to the Godhead, and it's a spiritual journey, and it's an initiation journey. And when upon having to return to this dimension, if I can put it that way, I mean, here I'm trying to use words. She said she remembered being so angry to tears, as she came back into this consciousness, and things were being named. Names were being applied to these things that were around us, and that was there was a very, not a betrayal, but I mean, because you're right, Pamela, we have to use words here and now. That's how we're operating. But this transition from reality to naming things is a very interesting transition that I think we should all bring to our consciousness in a way. I became aware of this thing that in anthroposophical circles is called counter space. We talk about negative space, but I don't think that's a very good term for what it really is, because it's not that there's nothing there, and it's not that it's bad in any way. It's just, it's not space as we're used to. It's not material as we're used to. But just because you can't see something, or there is something in the inside of an empty bowl. It's right? It's counter space. And if you become aware that it's there, that's something that there are no words for either. You can't really talk about that.
But you hear us say so often, there is more unseen than seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, we have been entrained to only think about and use our physical senses. And that is only 1/4 of the available information at most. One quarter. Now think about that. You know, if you're getting ready to drive and you only have 1/4 of the information about that vehicle, you know it goes in drive, but you don't know about reverse, you don't know about neutral. I mean, just think about that. You have 1/4 of the available information. Now, I want to tell a little story here if I can. Naming things. All right, we had a piece of property in the country a few years ago, and I was walking toward the mailbox, and I talked to everybody, and there was a berry plant there. And I went by and I said, "Oh my, you're beautiful. Look at your fruit." I said, "I guess you're a beautiful blackberry." And she said, "No, I am a red blackberry." And I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Well, I should know who I am." And so I went and got the mail, and I came back and I got on the computer, and honest to God, there is a red blackberry. All right.
Yeah.
Now, if I say, "Hello, Cara. Hello, Michael. I'm Pamela," you wouldn't question that. Of course I know who I am.
Right.
But we are not taught that we can communicate with every living thing, and we can. I know we can, because I do. And I have had more conversations with non-human life than I have with human life. And I know that's saying a lot, but I have had years where I've had no human interaction. Very little human interaction. So the birds and the animals and the fox and the plant life and the trees, that's who I communicated with. And I'm telling you, from my personal experience, a tree knows who they are.
Right.
And if you ask them who they are, who the heck am I to question that? And I did, and I learned a lesson there.
Right.
We cannot name, we must ask. And all we have to do is ask. And I say to you, "Who are you?" And you say, "Well, my name is Cara, and this is what I do, and this is who I am." And so that is part of the irritation at having to name everything, is we miss so much. We just miss it. But we're coming back to that, and we can come back to it.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. If you go back to Genesis, Yahweh gave man dominion over all the earth. I always had a problem with that.
Right.
Always had a problem, because what it's saying is that man trumps everything else on the planet. Everything else on the planet, every living creature, every plant is at man's disposal.
Right.
And if you take a look at what's going on today, that's exactly what's going on.
Right.
Right. So it goes along with what you're saying, Pamela, where people are unaware that everything else is living. Everything else can be communicated with. It's an energetic vibrational connection that we have with everything. The planet itself is Sophia.
Yeah, this is part of my research right now, Mike, because what happened in the early 20th century is the behaviorists redefined life.
Yeah.
And they practically filed us away. No, they didn't practically. They, in fact, did file us away in a category that really makes us not qualify as living, which is why it was so easy to objectify us and do the kinds of things that they did to us in the 20th century, right?
Yep.
So it's really, really important for us to go back and redefine life again so that it's true. It's absolutely true again. B.F. Skinner was the worst. I mean, he was the capstone on that whole movement to objectify us and make us actually subhuman, sub-life, not living things. And it's funny, Pamela, because you're talking about this. You know, I'm teaching children again next year, and I was, as you know, and I was talking to one of my children today. And interestingly enough, we were talking about my husband Yashka and I have an allotment here in England that we love very much, and we're constantly at it when it's time to grow things. And we wanted some sunflowers the other day. And so we walked up to this really sort of grand stand of sunflowers, and neither one of us could bring ourselves to get close to it or to attempt to cut a sunflower. And Yashka looked at me. I mean, this must be the most sentient flower I've ever come of all the flowers. And Yashka looked at me. I'm not going to repeat the exact word he said because it's something that's used commonly here in England, but he said, "I do believe that sunflower wants us to F off."
Yeah.
And I said, I'm getting the same feeling I'm getting exactly the same feeling. And I thought, that's really the sunflowers. Of course, they would be the sort of the most powerful sentient flowers amongst the bunch. But yeah, that was interesting because this sunflower really told us to leave it alone.
Good. It was fighting
Yeah,
for its life.
it
Mike,
was. It was like, get out.
great. That's great. And it's great that you were conscious enough to hear it, to know
Yeah.
what was happening. Mike, I have to go back to you talking about Yahweh giving the earth, giving man dominion over everything. And the first thing is Yahweh does not own the earth.
Exactly.
How can you give something you don't have?
Exactly.
Which is why we have to remember who and what we are, because we can't give anything we don't have. It's not possible.
Right.
So if I don't have compassion, I can't give it to you. But anyway, that's the number one thing that tells you that this Yahweh, who is the head archon down here, wants to give away what it does not have and does not own, which is impossible. And what is the out of balance ego here? It's saying you are better than everything else. Okay, if you have a balanced ego, you know that you don't want to be better than anything else. You want to be in communication and equal, and that word equal is not good, but you want to be where you can communicate and you have some interaction. And if you are at the top, you have very little interaction because you're too high and mighty for that. And so this psychopath Yahweh is the beginning of the out of balance ego.
Well, the relationship is supposed to be symbiotic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and hierarchy isn't natural to humans anyway at all. It's
No.
not a natural state of being for us. But then again, we would have to be able to utilize our telepathy, wouldn't we? I mean, if you think about that, we need to be able to communicate on that level to make hierarchies impossible to inflict on us.
Cara, I know from working on the other dimensions with other entities that we are different. We have different gifts and we have different abilities, but it is not hierarchical. It is so amazing to work together. And when it's your turn to give what you have, you just do. And you're grateful to be a part of it. And then you just step back and everyone else gives what they have. It is so perfect. And we have that capability. That is part of our makeup, but it's been hidden from us. But I'll tell you one thing, we were going to talk about the chaos that's around. May I introduce that now, Michael?
Absolutely.
Okay. Chaos is something that the opposition to all life loves, because they're very, very good at it. They're very, very good of confusing and distracting and all the words that come under chaos. My latest example of social chaos was in Joplin when the tornado happened. And when something like that happens and houses are gone and cars are standing on their nose straight up, and all of these things are happening. And my next door neighbor had a bone sticking out of her arm and all of that stuff. Chaos. Okay. Where do you go? There are no trees. There are no signs. You can't even find your own house because there's nothing familiar. There's nothing around. There's no signs. That's chaos. When there are no signs about where you are, where you need to be, how to get where you want to go, all of that chaos. What do you do when chaos hits? What you do is you ground. What do you ground into? You ground into our mama, our earth. You ground into the earth. That's how you get away from and make it through chaos. Absolutely. And you won't believe it, but I forgot the reason that I was segueing into chaos. Does anybody remember what I just said?
You wanted to bring up chaos.
I know, but I forgot what I was going into. Oh well, that's okay. Maybe it isn't important. But chaos is used to distract us from something else that's going on. And during the Joplin tornado, FEMA came in and wanted to take over everything. But I can tell you this, we were much stronger because we already had our organization. We already had everything going. We were helping each other, and people, other human beings, not systems, came in to help. And so FEMA could not get a handle on us here. It just could not. And the military trucks and all of that didn't even end up coming, very many of them. So if we can manage ourselves, and I'm not saying control, I'm saying manage advisedly. If we can manage ourselves during chaos and ground into our mama, then chaos cannot be used as a weapon against us, because we will be grounded and we will walk through the chaos instead of just running around in circles, which is what the opposition wants.
Right.
Pamela, to talk about chaos just quickly for the audience, and we'll continue on this thread, but I just want to introduce, I wrote a little list of things to Cara and Pamela about the barrage of chaos. Now, this is since March of this year. We had Ukraine, MH370, the disappearance of that plane, Gaza, the U.S. border fiasco, MH17, which was shot down, Ferguson, and of course we can't forget ISIS. This is all within 5 months. This is what's taken place since March of this year. So, and we'll go back to Pamela, what you were just talking about, but I wanted just to introduce that to the audience because people forget. It's almost like they dissociate from the timeline and the events, and because these things come and go, and that's by design. But like you said, Pamela, it's all distraction. It's all put out there. It's a barrage in order to keep people off balance, so people can't come together as a community.
Right.
And it's a recipe too, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
It is a recipe. It absolutely is a recipe. And if you grabbed a hold of me and turned me around, you know how little kids do, turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Then when you let loose of me, I'm dizzy and I'm looking east and west and north and south. Is that not what that list did?
Exactly.
You look here, you look there, and then what comes over you? Fear.
Right.
When a human being creates something, imagines something, or makes a decision out of fear, it is always incorrect. It is never correct, because fear is not something to operate from. It's information. And so when I was taught by my spirit teachers to work with fear, it was not go away fear. That's insane. I need fear. I need to know when something's not correct. But what I do need to do, and I've learned to work it, and it's so beautiful, is say, okay, fear, I got that information. I understand that if I step out in the road, I'm going to get hit if a car is coming. But I need to make a good decision, so back off.
Right.
Back off. I understand, but I will tell you this. If you try to lie to fear, it'll keep coming back because it reads energy.
Right.
Fear knows if you're screwing around with it. So
Right.
if you're really not going to do anything about it, fear will keep pestering you. But fear is information only. All it wants to do is give us information. But what we've been taught by the opposition to all life, and we've been entrained this way, to live in fear, to constantly be in fear. Why? Because the opposition to all life knows that we don't make good decisions. We can't operate well. Our potential and our abilities as an amazing human being doesn't function well out of fear. So we must say, thank you for the information. Now step back. It works beautifully.
Well, the other variable is that it's a confusion technique, which also contributes not only to the fear, as you mentioned, that's a big, huge aspect of it, Pamela, is also apathy. The confusion creates a situation where people become apathetic and they look at it and they say, you know what, this is just too much. I can't keep up with this. I can't deal with it. I can't keep up with this thing. So you know what? I'm just going to focus on my home and my kids and my job and get back on my hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Right? And just stay on it. That's the other aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys know.
Let somebody else take care of it, and it always goes wrong when someone else takes care of it.
Right.
Well, and obviously no one's taking care of anything. They're just creating more chaos. So yes, this is, you guys know, I both know that I've been focusing on the 20th century right now at this little snapshot for my own discussions in my writing. And one of the things that people are going to be aware of, if they're not aware of already, is that there is a political system that specializes in chaos and the struggle, and they're going to be surprised because it's actually communism. Communism specializes in the struggle and keeping the struggle, the dialectic, the argument, all of that going as the end in itself. And that's been inflicted on us in the 20th century. There's no end. There's no end. We're not debating to a point, a resolution.
Just debating.
We're just debating for the sake of debating. And that's pretty much what you're describing too.
Yep.
That chaos, debate, struggle. The struggle is actually the point.
Right.
But we can not comply with that. We have the ability of seeing it for what it is, which is a major point. If you don't see something, you can't do anything about it.
Right.
And so that's the thing that's so great about what's going on now is you can't miss it. Anybody that is even just a little bit conscious right now understands that there is a lot going on. And so some people are still asleep and really don't understand that there's a lot going on. They just think this is life. This is just natural what's happening. But those of us that are awake a little bit know that there is absolutely nothing natural about anything that's happening right now.
No, it's all engineered.
It's all engineered. There is no accident. There is nothing that just kind of, well, let's do this tomorrow. This is a plan for thousands of years.
Yeah. And this is why our children are so profoundly uncomfortable in their own skins right now, I think. Because they know absolutely that this is wrong, but they haven't really even got a reference point to write or to back in the day or any of that stuff. They don't have that reference point. They just come here to do something and they know that this is wrong. And they're very uncomfortable. They're very depressed. They're very unhappy about it. For the in large part, there's always this, we used to think it was the 45-year-olds, right? Midlife crisis, when they turned around and realized that something is just very wrong here. That's happening to our children now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it is supremely important. Honestly, it is the most important thing that we can do is to share with each other the positive. And I'm not saying that in the sense of ignoring what's going on. I'm saying, okay, let's look at it all. But let's know that there is unseen forces at work. We have the ability to be aware of that. We know that, but we have to tell each other that. I have spent the last month calling people and saying, I feel you getting depressed. Please know there's a reason. Things are crumbling, but things must crumble before they can be put aright. You can't, the universe is not redundant. So if we have a system in place, the universe is not going to present opportunities for a new system. That system needs to be moved so that there is a void, so the universe will present opportunities to fill that void.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like if I have a husband, why am I out looking for a husband? I'm not. You know what I mean? It really is that simple.
Well, Mike and Pamela, do you feel like that it's intensified a lot recently?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel that as well. It's just almost feels like it's doubling by the day. This feeling, this pressure, this heading for, resolution, or heading for a breaking point, or how do we want to even describe that?
Well, time has accelerated because since 2012 December, we have been in my awareness, we have been in the ending of time as we measure it. Mm-hmm. So as we get to the end of the way we measure time, it does accelerate. So that is absolutely happening. And sometimes I almost feel spiritually like I can't get my breath. You know how it feels when you've got a bunch of wind blowing at you and you feel like you can't get your breath? Mm-hmm. That's how I feel spiritually sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the way I see it, there's something is going on, and I agree with you, Pamela, because they are operating, the opposition is operating at a rate and pace which indicates to me that they are perfectly aware that they don't have a lot of runway left.
Yes. Right. Yes.
Because otherwise we would not see the barrage of events that I just listed off a little while ago. So something is definitely in play. They are perfectly aware of it, and they're throwing everything at us, including the kitchen sink,
right,
in order to break the spirit. And they're having a very difficult time. As much as they like to think they're winning, they have a fight on their hands.
Well, Simon Park and others have mentioned the year 2016 as pivotal. What do you think about that?
I don't think that we can name dates or times, because since 1990, my spirit teachers have been telling me that I can only measure time by happenings and events. There is no way where we are in time now since 2012. There is no way to predict. And I used to could predict within hours of something happening. But I can't do it now. I haven't been doing it, and I don't even try, because there are too many factions that have the ability to get in there and mess with time. And so you in my awareness and how I work, I can't say dates, but we are accelerating, and it could be even much faster than that.
Right. See, I don't use dates because my ideology from a spiritual perspective is our thoughts create our reality. So from that perspective, I can't put a date out on the table, because the only way things are going to change is that people themselves, their consciousness, their thoughts have to change.
Right.
And when they start looking in different directions, in more positive directions, looking through a positive lens, and they focus their thoughts and their intentions, because it has to be kinetic. In other words, you can't just be a spectator. You come to Earth, you come here, you have to participate in what goes on.
Yes.
Once we get critical mass,
exactly. I just wrote that down on a piece of paper, Michael. Critical mass.
Yeah, that's when we'll start seeing a shift. So is that 2014, 15, 16, 2020, 2050? Who knows? But to me, that's how it works, because that's how they got us here, by changing our thoughts, by changing our intentions. They have us focusing on very negative things, and so our thoughts are focused on negative, and therefore negative manifests.
Yeah.
And to me, that's how it's going to work. When you start putting dates out there, I don't know. It's kind of like it's gambling.
That's sort of another focus or dodge, maybe, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe critical mass will be later this afternoon.
Well, one of my shows is named Critical Mass.
Yes.
I know.
And, we are at that point. But when things are going to happen is when a certain percentage of humanity is conscious to a certain point.
Right.
And that's when it's going to happen. So it depends on us. It really does. And yet, every day I feel more and more consciousness coming to the top. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
literally feel it. And people that would never dream of talking certain things will. But we
Mm-hmm.
must remember that we all awaken in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
We all awaken. So I cannot expect anything. I just have to know that consciousness is happening, consciousness is coming to the top, and I'm thrilled however it comes, whatever
Right.
package it's in. But we do need to go back to the young people, and we do need to let them know that even
Yeah.
though it appears that everything's going to hell in a handbasket,
Mm-hmm.
appearance is only one very small part. There is
Well,
so much more unseen than is seen.
and that is a very, very good and interesting and important and critical and, in fact, delicate topic there, or part of what we're trying to do, Pamela. I often talk about how I thought about bringing the kinds of things that I was discovering to my own children, or to any children, really. I mean, they were teenagers, older teenagers at the time. And I remember the very first instance I had, or experience I had with that, was with my oldest son just after Fukushima. And I thought, I have to say something to him about this. And I broached the subject, and because he is very much a representative of the young people his age on the planet, very sensitive, very pushed around by what's going on, knowing that things are wrong but not quite sure why, and just sort of trying to get on his feet in terms of being able to handle why he's here, and what and the point in history in which he's incarnated, which is just huge. Um, and his instant reaction was, well, okay, then what's the point, Mom? I mean, he went from zero to there's no point in continuing then, because
Mm-hmm.
do you know what I mean? So
Right.
that really pulled me up short to begin with. And since then, it's become a very big topic in my thinking, because these people have come in at a time where it really is their job. They've volunteered to be here at this time to fight the predator, in my opinion, to help in this particular turning point in time, to be on the vanguard of the new human being, or the new dimension, however you want to put it, however you want to characterize it. But they're also very delicate in a way. Because they're juggling skyscrapers, you know to use a metaphor. This is a huge task that has been set for them. And so I personally am constantly, you guys both know this, trying to find ways to sort of inform and find release valves for what's up with them, as they try to work their way through what it is they're working their way through. So considering the generation that's actually up there in the really in the foxholes, that are very young, these kids who are very young, in their 20s or late teens even, I think is a very important thing that we have to consider, and how we help them, because we have actually reference points in our memory, in our conscious memory. Obviously, we all have access to all information, but in our conscious memory on this plane, in this time, we have access to reference points that they don't have at their fingertips. So how we help them is important.
Well, one thing we've got to do, and I do it every chance I get with any age child, is not assume that they can't handle information, because they can.
Mm-hmm.
My little nephew and niece were 3 and 5 when my dad passed over, and we
Mm-hmm.
were sitting out on the deck, and it was just me and these two little ones out there. The 3-year old, the little girl, came up to me and said, "Do you see Granddaddy?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "No, do you see him?" Says, "Yes, he's sitting right over there." And I said, "Oh, I'm so glad he's here with us." And then the 5-year old said, "Well, I see him too. Hi, Granddaddy."
Mm-hmm.
And then my niece, 3-year old, said, "Granddaddy, they're not changing your tie. You have the same tie on you had on last night. Daddy was a good dresser." So
uh,
when we assume that these children cannot handle things, then we're not broaching subjects when we might be the only one that would ever broach that subject with them. So we
right.
don't need to assume that they can't handle it. And I'm going to tell you, more children, more young people have had interaction with people who are no longer on this side than you would ever imagine. And that is a good place to start with things. There is more unseen than seen. And they know if they've had interaction with their grandmother, they know that's who it was. It's no, airy fairy thing. They know. And you can use that to say there's more unseen than seen. And it's been a great tool for me.
The trick is to catch them early. It's to make sure that you keep them within that frame of mind. In other words, you have this ability, you have this intuitiveness. You're able to, you're able to communicate with the unseen because we can.
Oh, yes.
That's why the opposition or the predator, they start very, very early trying to shut all that down because they know it too.
Absolutely.
And it's very important that for those adults and guardians or whatever that are awake and they have children is to make sure that you support their ability to be creative, to have their imagination, to understand they have intuition, that these things exist. Right. Because the society and the culture is teaching them that that's all woo-woo stuff. That's all make-believe. It's all, if you keep thinking that way, we'll put you on a drug.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, and the more they interact with machines, the more stunted it gets.
Exactly. That's why, have a new computer, have a new phone. Here's a new reality TV show.
Yeah.
It's a battle. It's a war that's being waged right now, and we have to win it.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I like audio. I like radio because your imagination must work. Now, when you have video, not as much of your imagination works because we lean on our eyes so much, and I've been blind 3 times in the last 3 years. So I know how much we depend on our physical senses. But if we don't have our physical senses, then that makes us lean on something else. And that's what we need. We need to look at the unseen. That really is where a lot of our support is. And if we can't be aware, if we're not aware of the unseen, then yes, we do feel off balance. Oh gosh, there's something I wanted to remember to tell you guys. I forgot to write a note.
Okay.
I've learned something new about dyslexia.
What?
It has been something that has been given to children coming in now because dyslexics are harder to entrain and program.
That is something that Mary Rodwell just brought up when I watched her speak a couple of weeks ago.
Really? Oh my gosh.
And Simon Park says he feels that he's dyslexic for that reason, to keep him from being sucked into the entrainment.
I have dyslexia.
Absolutely.
Do you?
Yeah.
I do.
Well, there you go.
So does my David, my husband.
Yeah, it's not very prominent, but it is enough that I'm aware of it. When I become aware of it is when I'm driving and I look at a license plate in front of me.
Yeah.
And I see a certain sequence of numbers and alphas.
Yeah.
And then I look back and it's different. And I'm thinking to myself, wow.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of dyslexia.
Yeah. Well, I have also.
That is so amazing to me that other people are talking. I know that there's information floating around and different ones of us grab it at the same time.
Yes.
And I had no idea that anyone else was talking about that.
Mary Rodwell has just started talking about that. You know who she is?
No, I really am not familiar with her.
Mary Rodwell has been a UFO researcher. She's also a nurse and a midwife and all kinds of things. She's Australian. She's been doing this for 20 or 30 years. And she's actually got videos of children talking about their visits with extraterrestrials and talking about the new humans and what that's like and what the transition is in terms of how these children view it. And it's very interesting what she's bringing. And that was one of the things that she did bring, was that dyslexia was a protection.
Yes. Yes, so, I have just figured that out recently in the last few weeks. And I am aware because of a case I've been working on of someone who was taken and to a place and people were trying to test him out to see if he would fit into this program. And he did not, and thank God he didn't. Not that Yahweh crazy God, but the real God. That he didn't pass because he would have been, one of the MK Ultra type people.
Yeah.
And so as I was going through, because I was trying to think, now, why would this person be rejected for this? And I got dyslexia. And then I started studying that, and that came right through to me. So that just confirms to me that what I know about information being out there, and and we grab it. That's why you hear 8 or 9 people saying the same thing. I've never heard so many people speak out about Zionism as right now. And
Right.
I'm 60 years old, and so I've never heard it my whole
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And to hear everyone speaking about it at the same time, it's out there. Now is the time, because everybody's out there. I've been working on a show for that for over 3 months. I still can't get it to where I can't get the approval to release it. So
It is amazing because before this latest march into Gaza,
yeah,
people would talk about Zionism and people weren't connecting the dots.
right.
And then when Benjamin Netanyahu, that nut job, went in there and was murdering all these innocents, and the Israelis were pulling up couches and coolers and
Right.
watching innocent people being
Watch the
slaughtered.
show. Watch the show.
It was, it's almost like that had to happen in order for people to understand what Zionism is, in order to open up the dialogue, is how I should say it.
Right.
And I have seen it too. I have seen it exponentially just launch, where people are talking more and more about it. I have put a lot of articles, in fact, I penned one myself, about Zionism. And Cara, you're out in Europe, and I've seen the, on the alternative media, I've seen the marches and the protests. It's amazing. It's like thousands upon thousands of people are in the streets.
Yeah. This is enough. We've had enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is too much. It's done.
It takes something so traumatic and dramatic to bring some people awake. Some people hear that alarm and they're on their feet, they're ready to go.
Right.
Other people, it takes 2 cup of coffees, 3 cigarettes,
Yeah.
and wandering around, and before they can get awake. So we all come to consciousness in a different way.
Right. And different.
And that
time.
was my oldest dog.
I heard. Hello. Hello. Well,
Yeah.
listen. What I feel about that at this point is that we'll be awake for them. We'll do it for them till they're awake. That's all right. That's
Yeah,
why
we
we're
have
here.
to.
That's why we're here. It's okay.
We have to. Now, if we're going to talk about Zionism, can we go into that a little bit?
Sure.
Did any of you see the article about 313 Jewish survivors and descendants of survivors and victims of the Nazi genocide signed a letter?
Yeah, that was on Veterans Today, I think, right?
No, I didn't
Was
see
it?
that. Tell me about it.
I can't remember where I got it. But anyway, they pinned this letter and signed their name to it. And I'll be happy to read a little bit of it if you want me to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yep.
As Jewish survivors and descendants of survivors and victims of the Nazi genocide, we unequivocally condemn the massacre of Palestinians in Gaza and the ongoing occupation and colonization of historic Palestine. Now, that first sentence is a mouthful. They called it massacre. They leave no question about their condemnation, and they talk about the Palestinian and colonization. Okay. The only thing they didn't say was genocide, which it is. Okay, we further condemn the United States for providing Israel with the funding to carry out the attack, and Western states more generally for using their diplomatic muscle to protect Israel from condemnation. That was another mouthful.
Yeah.
Okay, here comes genocide. Genocide begins with the silence of the world.
Yeah.
Now, these are experiencers of horrificness. We are alarmed by the extreme racist dehumanization of Palestinians in Israeli society, which has reached a fever pitch. In Israel, politicians and pundits in the Times of Israel and the Jerusalem Post have called openly for genocide of Palestinian, and right-wing Israelis are adopting neo-Nazi insignia. That is from descendants of survivors.
Brett, I've actually got VT up. I'm looking for it because I'd like to reblog it on Vortex. And you know what it is, guys, that keeps that, what is it that enforces that silence? What is it that makes that silence possible?
PC.
That's right. That's right.
PC, because people are afraid to say anything. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not an accident. We
Yep.
must not comply with politically correctness. We can't comply with it because it's against us. It does nothing to help humanity. It is
Right.
against humanity. And when we look at the words that are used in PC, it is lies. It is the opposition, because we're talking about anti-Semitic nomenclature or anti-Semitic words or whatever. They're not even Semites.
Right.
Right.
You know, they're not even. So why are we using that? And yet that gets tossed. People lose their careers. I know in Europe it's worse, but over here it's horrific. And I'm telling you something, when I go out somewhere, I speak. No matter where I am, I speak. And I go against the rules because we have to. All of these rules and laws are not there to help us. They're to suppress us. My spirit doesn't need suppressing. I don't need to be suppressed. I don't need to be controlled at all. I know myself. I will manage myself. I don't need someone outside controlling me.
Right. We're self-governing.
Absolutely.
Well, and this happens everywhere, and you're right. I think it is where, well, is it? I don't know. It's so hard to say where, because it's just so, it's such a prevalent blanket of evil thrown across all of humanity, this political correctness. It happened to me, I will say this right now, it happened to me constantly at the People's Voice when I was a writer researcher on that channel. I had a producer who was constantly censoring me, and actually said to me one time, I think, that people who have a problem with political correctness are just people looking for an excuse to be racist.
And that's not true.
No, and this was at the People's Voice, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's another word they like to throw around, racist, you know. It's just, it gets old after a while. You know,
it does.
They keep saying that stuff, and what they don't realize is they keep saying it and keep saying it, and after a while, it just means absolutely nothing.
Means nothing. That's right.
True.
It means nothing. And they don't even,
absolutely true.
They completely lose the, even what the definition of race is. Everything is racist. You know,
It has no impact, because if I'm speaking the truth and I know it's the truth, for instance, if I say that, you know, the so-called Jews in Zionism are Khazars, and I know this is true, and you're going to tell me, well, if you continue to say that, you're a Jew hater or you're a racist, whatever it may be, it has no impact, because I look at you and what you're saying is you're either some kind of disinformation agent or you're ignorant.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Most of the time it's ignorant, ignoring the facts.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. And you know, if there's any racism in our world today, it is against the white race.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
The bigotry is at us.
Yeah.
And the bucket the bucket that's being filled up is against white people. It has absolutely nothing to do with anybody else. And you know, all the other races can do anything they want, and then the whites have to be tolerant of it. But let us do one thing that someone thinks might be something.
Tolerant.
Oh, absolutely. They're not going to be tolerant for 1 second.
You and Mr. Lash are going to have a great conversation.
You are. You are. Oh, Pamela. I just watched his last offering on Red Eye, so wait till you guys are going to have a great time.
You guys are right on the money.
Oh, man.
I heard that, you
Did
know,
you?
and oh yeah, it's time. It's time for this to come out. And this is breaking this PC, you know.
Yeah.
All of this stuff we're talking about is breaking the PC. And you know, can we go into Ferguson now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, now you guys are going to have to help me with that one, because being over here,
Right.
you're going to know more about that than I am.
Well, it's 4 hours from me, physically, you know. But one of the things that's amazing in this is that there were lots of black people there. There were a few white people there, and I understand that it is now 85% black. But because we had alternative media there, we were able to see things that we normally don't see.
Right.
And people are waking up of every color and every race and in every situation. And a couple of things that I wanted to share about Ferguson is, number one, this situation had one alternative media person with their camera, two residents with their video, and a provocateur.
Yeah.
So this provocateur had a brick, and he was behind the local people that were there demonstrating and saying, you know, we want our town back. We don't like this, and you know, all of this, but they were calmly doing this in an organized fashion. Well, this provocateur stands behind and throws this brick so that if the cops are nuts, they could fire in that direction. Of course, he took off running. Okay, this is what these provocateurs do.
And he threw the brick at the police.
Right. And so the alternative press reporter and the two residents kept up with this provocateur.
Oh, wow.
Kept their cameras on the provocateur. This is how we're going to win some of these wars, some of these battles. Okay, and so he yelled out, one of the residents yelled out and said, "Who are you? Where do you live? You're not from around here." And they pulled his scarf off so you could see his face.
Wow.
You know, it tells you the cowards that they are. People that use different names and hide their face and hide their identities. They're cowards. Let's show them up for what they are. Okay, so they keep pointing these cameras from all these directions because there are three people with that. And they kept following him, and they got him to where he was almost so flustered he didn't know what to do. He was stuttering, for gosh sakes. Okay, what happens there? They diffuse the whole situation. He isn't going to do that anymore because he knows, they know his face, number one. Number two, the police and the officials are not going after the provocateurs because that was a false flag. We know false flags have always started everything, and this was supposed to be a start to something. But is it not encouraging that we got to see that? We got to see it happen?
It's encouraging for the primary thing I'm thinking of is that they understand what the real story is instantly. It's not the chaos. It's not the theater in front of them. You know, they dared to leave the play on the stage and chase the real story.
That's right. Absolutely. And they stuck with this guy. That's what I think is great is they didn't have guns. They had cameras.
Yeah.
You know, and when the opposition tries to get us to use their weapons, we'll always lose. If we use our weapons, our imagination weapons, our creativity, we will always come out winning. And you know, we are going to win the war. We may lose a few of these battles, but we absolutely will win the war. I've seen it. I've been forward. I have seen us win the war. We will win it.
Oh yeah, I believe absolutely.
Oh, we will. We absolutely will. It is taking too long, in my opinion, but who asked me, you know?
Well,
it's just that I'm getting tired, that's all.
Yeah, oh, that's it. You know, when Ferguson popped up, you guys, I was just so tired of it. I thought, oh, God, come on, again. You know, and I certainly can't be the only one.
Well, a couple of things backfired on them in Ferguson because they thought they were going to be able to march right over and right through a black community.
Right. Absolutely.
And they thought they would take advantage of this, would be the perfect opportunity for them to show their militarized police weaponry.
Yeah.
And it didn't pan out. It didn't work. And again, in Ferguson, Pamela and Cara, it's the same old formula.
Yes.
They came out and they said, you know, this kid, Michael Brown, had broken the eye socket of the cop that was in the police truck.
Yeah.
That wound up to be not true.
Oh, really? I didn't know that
was not true. CNN actually had come out and said that could not be verified, and then came out and said it was not true. And then, you know, they had come out and said that, hey, there were 12 eyewitnesses that, you know, back up the cops' version of the story. And unnamed sources, anonymous spokespeople, basically, which is the Ministry of Propaganda says that there were 12 witnesses, not one step forward. So they had their agent provocateurs, and the most amazing thing, which caught the attention of a lot of people, was they were firing rubber bullets at the press.
Yeah, I know. And you know, they hit one woman in the stomach, and it actually ripped her skin. One of Alex Jones' reporters got hit, but it didn't break the skin. He had a huge bruise, but he said he saw this woman reporter. She wasn't a reporter. She was a minister. She was a Protestant pastor that was there. Yeah, and it did hit her stomach, and it ripped the skin. But, you know, when did this police militarization start? It started when they gave them tasers. That was the beginning of the dehumanization of us, of the people that they're supposed to protect and serve. When they started talking about tasers, chills just would go through me, because that is the beginning. They are horrific. They are inhumane. They should not be there. You know, when you've got and you know this, Cara, when you've got officers around the world who keep the peace with no guns, you know, with the Billy Club. And we have guns, and I'm a gun owner, and I love guns, and I think we should have them, just like I like my knives to chop up vegetables with, you know. I wouldn't want them to take that away either. But, you know, why is it that when a police officer has a gun, he feels like he has to use it all the time? It didn't used to be that way, but it's accelerated. I've got files of how this has accelerated incrementally to the point now that instead of shooting somebody in the leg and stopping them, they just kill them.
Yeah, that's been a whole process of recruitment, training, you know, mind control, psychological warfare, and I'm talking about against the people who are now calling themselves police officers. They've changed the profile, the nature of how these people operate in the world, and then pulled them together as a force, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse.
Well, it is my awareness that a lot of them are taking steroids, and you know, they're just so hyped up on testosterone that they're just, and they're sitting there with all these beautiful tools, you know, that shouldn't even be over here. And you know, the Homeland Security had $35 billion worth of grants that they gave to local police departments so that they could buy tactical gear, military style armor, and mine resistant vehicles. Mine resistant vehicles? Give me a break. They used to be the guys that walked the beat tapping their stick, you know, to let everybody know you're safe, somebody's out. It's a whole different world now. Why? Because we have allowed it incrementally to get to the point that we're in a war zone now.
Yeah, we have a counterpart to that, though, and I'm not belittling or diminishing any what you're saying, because it's absolutely just as bad as you're saying it is, and it needs to be addressed. But the counterpart to that, and I have to say this always warms my heart, so I'm going to stick it in there, is the sheriff.
Oh yeah.
The county sheriffs have not been, as far as I can make out, you know, from my perch over here, but the county sheriffs have managed to, by and large, maintain their original function and their original, sort of be true to their original purpose.
Some have.
Well, those that are part of Oath Keepers.
Yeah.
Some have, yeah.
You know, the other thing, too, about this whole militarization, there was an article that Gordon Duff had posted 2 years ago, which was American police now Israeli DHS trained.
Yeah.
Precursor to dictatorship. And I had reposted this back earlier this month. It got a lot of hits on the blog. So what you're seeing is the exact same type of police behavior that you see in Israel against the Palestinians. You're seeing it here in the United States. Now, to take it a step further, there was another article that was written that said that the St. Louis County Police Department that killed Michael Brown, they had trained it was a week-long training in Israel 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is what you're seeing, you know, so it's the whole...
Why? I mean, doesn't anybody see that as odd that we're sending people to Israel for training?
Police departments are going to Israel to train on police tactics that are used by a Zionist state.
And people aren't blinking.
People, people sitting there scratching their heads and saying, well, how did this happen? Why
How
did the
did it
police
happen?
think the way they do? It's because they're being trained to think this
Yeah.
way. They're
Right.
being trained
Absolutely.
to operate the way they're operating. These aren't rogue cops for the most part. They're still good cops,
No.
don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and the whole thing when people would say to me, "Oh, the US military or the police would never fire upon the
Yeah,
public."
right.
I'm like,
Right.
"Well, you better take a step back and think about that."
Yeah, have
That's
a look
right.
at what's going on right now.
But there's a whole tie into Israel, into the Zionist state with regard to our police training in this country
Mm-hmm.
that people need to connect the dots to.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. And if you can be a little bit awake, a little bit conscious, you'll see that it is the same. The
Mm-hmm.
attitude is the same. And for those of us who've been around long enough to remember the experiences we had when it was to protect and to serve was the
Mm-hmm.
motto,
Hmm.
Right, right.
it's a whole different world. Now, $450 million of military surplus. How can you have military surplus? Military equipment, armored vehicles, and grenades were given to local police. Now,
Right, right.
do you know that Congress, if they would follow the Constitution, which they do not,
No.
forbids federal government controlling or funding or in any way being involved in local law enforcement?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's in our
Right.
Constitution.
Right.
And we're not even supposed to have Army boots active on our soil.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they are. And you know, this is a holiday weekend over here, and the stops, the drug stops and the drunk stops, all of those are illegal.
And they're calling him no refusal
I know they are.
in
I
direct
saw that.
violation of the Fourth
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amendment. Direct,
Absolutely. Direct.
unbelievable.
It is absolutely, yeah. I had some guys in here doing some electrical work the other day, and of course, I wouldn't miss an opportunity to talk to them about all this stuff. And I said, "Have you ever had a sobriety test when you've been out driving?" They said, "Yes." I said, "Did you realize that that is illegal and that's against our Constitution?" And they looked at me, and these are like 26-year-old guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, "That's illegal."
Yeah.
I said, "Now,
Yeah.
if you're swerving or if they had a phone call and they gave your license number and said,
Mm.
this guy's a danger, he's almost hit 3 people and all that," yeah, then they have a reason.
It's a probable
Right.
But
cause. They have to have probable cause.
We'll
but
pause.
just to
Yeah.
say I'm guilty, just to
Right.
say I'm guilty and I have to prove I'm innocent,
Right.
let me tell you something. I'm in kidney failure and I can't walk a straight line no matter what, and I can't drink. I would
Right.
never pass any of that stuff,
Right.
where they
Right.
make you touch your nose and walk a line and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Things are not what they appear to be.
Well,
Right.
Pamela, the reason why they make people do that, most people cannot do that. They cannot walk a straight line. They cannot hop on one leg for 5 minutes. What
Right.
they're doing is those little stupid tricks that they use, that's creating probable cause.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
creating it so
yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
now they could say, well, that person couldn't walk, a straight line for 20 feet, or they couldn't hop on their leg for 5 minutes. We suspect they've been drinking. That's their probable cause. So the moral of the story is don't do any of that stuff.
that's
Right.
right. That's right. Absolutely. But I tell you, we stay home during the holidays because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to get into any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I, I just don't want to get
Hmm.
into it. I've got one more story from Ferguson.
Okay.
Alternative news media again. Thank goodness for them.
Mm-hmm.
A man and a woman, black, were standing there. The guy had a piece of paper and he was holding it up to the camera. It was a constitution. And
Ah.
he said, "We want our constitutional rights. We want our town back."
Mm-hmm.
And so the alternative reporter said, "What do you all think about Obama?" And the woman said, "I'll tell you what, I'm living in a war zone now. I was not in a war zone before.
Right.
Now look at my town. Look at this. We are in a war zone." A guy walked up and said, "I'm trying to get my grandmother to the doctor. 3 times before I can get a block, I had to show ID." That's
Right.
Nazi Germany.
It so is. Absolutely, it is.
We are absolutely in. But Ferguson is another false flag thing
Yep.
where they want to see they're testing just like they did Katrina, and we
Mm-hmm.
fail. This
Mm-hmm.
time, Ferguson, we may not have failed. We did on Katrina. But we, what do the rest of the people that are not in Ferguson, how are they responding? How are they reacting? Where are they supporting? Which part are they support? The militarization or the people? Where is this? And that is, there are so many layers and so many details to all of these things. But how did the rest of us respond? Well, I'll tell you, this time we had alternative reporters there, which were giving us information that is not the PC, that is not the bought and paid for media, the prostitutes. That I can't remember who said. But we need to be encouraged because people are standing up, and black people with the black skin said that Obama had turned this into a war zone. And that is on video. You can go look it up if you want to. So, and they're not ignorant. It is so insulting to think that anyone is so ignorant that we don't know our rights. This man was holding a paper constitution. To say, I know what this is, and by God, I want it.
Well, by the way, I think that Obama was on the golf course when all this was taking place.
Oh, probably.
I'm sure.
Well, this is actually a couple of conversations that Mike and I have had recently. One was about the fact that the border to the United States seems to be located in Toronto, Canada now. We had talked about that, remember?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. Did people sort of catch that when we were talking about that?
I hope so.
I hope so, because that's important. And the other thing we talked about on that show was the Constitution and how it's not taught. It's not taught in the United States anymore. It's very difficult to get true information about that document, and how John Coleman had gone to, remember, I couldn't remember who it was, Mike. It was Sam Ervin. I think it was Sam Ervin he went to, who gave him his thousands and thousands of pages of congressional records, and then Coleman went through them all and wrote a book on the Constitution, so that people would understand actually how that actually functions. This is something, I bought a copy of that for each one of my children, because they can't get it anywhere else. They're not being taught. And they need to understand that we have to pass this around and pass it down. And it's another way of empowering us. I mean, that came from somebody's imagination, right, Pamela?
Right. Absolutely.
as a protection for us. So let's get back to it and grab it. Now, the other thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about these alternative journalists in Ferguson is that these are people who are actually out there chasing the story and not out to make a name for themselves. They were not the story themselves, which very often happens. And I wasn't sure if Mike wanted to talk about the situation with the activists in the United States at all this time around. We don't have to, but we did bring that. We were kind of talking about that a little bit privately. Or do you want to leave that for some other time?
Well, I mean, we could talk about it. I'll just set the scene a little bit here, some background. I was on YouTube, and I do the blog, so I get the feeds. And so one of the YouTube channels that I subscribe to is Weather War 101, and he does a great job. He talks about geoengineering. He's on the leading edge, this guy. He clearly understands how the geoengineering works, and he goes way, way beyond what many quote-unquote advocates talk about. So in any case, long story short is he had posted a 20 to 25-minute interview, which is Michael Murphy, talking about how he was essentially torn apart by Dane Wigington, that Dane was going on radio shows, and he was talking about how Michael Murphy has a substance abuse problem, just basically throwing the guy under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
It resonated with me, and I'll just say this, and then we could talk about it some more. Because when I had Dane on my show, and don't get me wrong, when I spoke to Dane, he was a gentleman, he was great to speak to, but one of the things that I did find odd was I had asked him a question about when the third part of the movie was going to be made. Who is doing the spraying? And that was something that Michael Murphy had in the queue.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea about anything about Michael Murphy, to be honest with you, other than the fact that I watched his first two documentaries, which Dane contributed to, by the way. He was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dane launched right into Michael Murphy has a drug problem.
Right.
And I remember, when I was having this conversation with Dane, I had said, look, do you really want to talk about that? Do you really want me to put that out there? Because I was uncomfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought to myself, well, number one, let's just say it's true. Well, even if it's true, why would I want to air that?
Right.
you know?
Right.
And, Dane's rationale was, well, if people are sending money in donations, they should know that the money in the donations will amount to nothing because the movie's not going to get made. Or it's a
Okay.
very high probability that the movie would not be made. So, I don't know. Now, what I did was I just netted that whole conversation down to a very brief moment in the show when I actually put it up because, quite honestly, I just did not want to vilify Michael Murphy. I don't know the man, and I don't
Right.
even know if he has a substance abuse problem. So why would I go there?
Right.
So anyway, so again, to kind of sum this up, so when this clip was played of Michael Murphy talking about this, I just thought to myself, you got to be kidding me. So I had to take a step back and I had to pause and say, is Dane Wigington disinformation?
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the comments that was made in the interview was Michael Murphy had said that he approached Dane and said, look, are you still looped into Bechtel?
Yeah. I
And
see.
yeah, and he said when he brought that up, Dane absolutely lost his mind.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know. I'm torn between trying to figure this out. I spoke to
Mm-hmm.
Dane. I found him to be a gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
very well versed. There's no doubt that Dane has contributed greatly to the awareness of geoengineering. There's no doubt about it.
Right. But you
But
have to be, it's one of those things that we always have to be aware of truth sandwiches, right?
exactly. So I'll leave it there. And if you guys want to comment on that,
Yeah, I have some stuff to say about this because I've been in the middle of this. This is my arena, as you know, for the last 4 years. And since my mom died. And for me, it's like, well, who am I? I'm just this little squirt trying to get this story out because I'm told that this story matters, and it does matter. So here I am with this book tucked under my arm, like walking into the wind in the United States, trying to just get this story aired. And of course, one of the first people I came up, one of the first people I became aware of was Michael Murphy, because I saw What in the World Are They Spraying? It was out, but it
yeah.
was barely out. It was just out when that happened. And of course, Mark McCandlish, whom I talk about, and Mark was in the second movie, Mike's second movie. So that's actually, you could ask Mark about Mike if you wanted to, because Mark was key in the second movie. And I've actually seen the trailer to the third movie, and I thought it was earnest, and I thought it was genuine, I thought it was truthful, and he had some people who had actually even been in the Bush administration asking questions like, I want to know who's doing this and what their agenda is. So to me, it struck me as a very truthful sort of Michael taking care of his part of the deal. And you're right, Dane has contributed some stuff. I don't agree with everything I think Dane tends to be on the too much on like the Al Gore bandwagon with the polar ice caps and all of that kind of stuff.
There's so much doom too. One of the problems that
Yeah.
Dane has is Dane is basically saying anytime you listen to him on an interview that the world is going to end next Tuesday.
Yeah. So here, and that's fear mongering, and that's part of what they want. So,
Right.
I actually a couple weeks ago received an email from Michael, and I had not. I guess I should give a little bit more background to this story because I have found myself being thoroughly irritated by the chemtrail activists in the United States. And I've spoken to both of you about this, I think. But the reality has been that they get very big and they haven't really got time for, it seems to me, now this is just my characterization from the outside looking in, but it seems to me that they buy their own press and they start becoming this commodity and just all of those things that go along with becoming very well known in any arena. It's a human condition. I felt it when I was with TPV and I thought, this is addictive, this is bad, I don't want this. It's about the media. It's about, this thing that they hook into us via fame and fortune and all of those things. And it doesn't much matter how it is that you come into the public eye. You're still susceptible to these kinds of things. But for a couple of years, I'd been very good friends with Michael Murphy. He'd been very receptive to all of the questions that I'd asked him and very sort of available. And then once my book had been published, I could hear crickets in the background and tumbleweeds blowing and dead silence. And they wouldn't have anything to do with me anymore. None of them. And I absolutely couldn't figure out why, and I really still couldn't say exactly why. I can speculate, but it would be pure speculation. But a couple weeks, and it made me angry because this is not what we don't have time for this
Right.
kind of stuff. Okay. We need to be getting all the stories out there. We need to get everybody's help. It just should be a group effort. And I haven't had the same experience with some other folks. Mark McCandlish comes to mind, as you know. He's always one of my favorite guys. Sophia Smallstorm, actually I got her on the phone. She sent me her phone number, and I could talk to her at length about this kind of stuff. You see what I'm saying? It's so there are people who have continued to make themselves accessible no matter what. Michael Murphy and Dane Wigington were not two of those people, so they go in the same basket with me. But a couple weeks ago, I did get an email from Michael, and he said there's been a division in our ranks, and I think we all need to pull together. We need to not let this. And I had no idea what he was talking about until I talked to Mike about this, or until Mike said something about it. And I thought, first, my initial reaction was, yeah, I bet there is a division in our ranks, and you guys have brought it on us. You guys have brought it on us with ego and becoming celebrities, celebrity activists, and things like that. However, addressing what Michael is bringing right now, I do have to wonder why Dane would go into a sort of character assassination mode like this. In my opinion, it's completely inappropriate.
I agree.
So this makes me suspect everything that Dane Wigington says from now on, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and his whole global warming argument is it's difficult. I've had others contact me, Claire Swinney out of New Zealand, and she's heavily into the whole chemtrail research also. And she said to me, Mike, I don't know what he's talking about. None of the data points to global warming, and he continues to talk about it,
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And
did you see the article that the ice caps are the thickest they've been in several seasons?
Yeah, they're getting bigger. Come on, no. See, this is wrong. This whole, it may very well be that, because I do know, and I guess I should have said this to you guys at some point, but there is a team of geoengineers being headed up by some of the people that you might know. One of the guy who's out of Carnegie Mellon. I can't remember his name off the top of my head because I haven't talked about this in a while, but they've formed this group who, using the idea that methane may be released into the atmosphere, are talking about nuking the atmosphere to create interference waves. Okay. Yeah. And this is because these are the biggest, baddest, geoengineering experts on the planet. They could be taken seriously. So it almost doesn't matter whether or not the ice caps are melting. This remedy that they're proposing is what cannot be allowed.
exactly. And here's the thing. And you guys tell me if you think I'm out in left field. I don't care about the argument about whether the Earth is warming or whether the Earth is cooling. What I'm focused on is they are spraying. And I don't think they're spraying because it's warming or cooling. They're spraying in order to terraform the planet.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right? So when we start getting into it's warming, it's cooling, it's another distraction, which is like we're dancing around.
That's that debate. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You've got to look at the opposition. It's opposite everything having to do with life.
Right.
If you go with that, honestly, it always works. And when you see someone who's distracting, I don't know a whole lot about this story. I mean, I've read it, but I haven't done any research on it. But anytime a hard-hitting question comes up and someone distracts, you need to look into that, because that's not an accident.
No.
Right. And if Mike is really getting ready to issue a movie that names names, what an amazing coincidence that all of a sudden he's a drug addict, according to his biggest rival. His biggest rival is Dane Wigington. Come on.
And who did Dane work for, right?
Yeah, I can't, but I don't know. I just can't. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, but you know what? I had my heart broken by these activists 2 years ago, so that's old news for me. It's
and hey, if Dane is listening to this, or this gets back to him, I want to just say we need to talk about this, because you put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Right. You had discussions on radio shows, mine included, where you talked about Michael Murphy and his supposed drug issue.
Yeah.
It needs to be talked about. Nobody's a sacred cow.
And I've been giving both of those men all due respect. When I talk about this and I try to bring facts and figures and things like that, I bring something from Michael when he's doing good work. I bring something from Dane when I think he's doing good work. Okay, they've had, and they neither one of them will, well, Michael had and apparently now is going to, but Dane Wigington, I've never been able to get him to give me the time of day. So, and you know what? You both know, and everybody who's listening to your story, to your radio shows know, I have a hell of a story to tell. I think it's important that it gets out. So, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that sound like sour grapes on my part? I'm not really. Okay, I'm not trying to make it sound like that. It's just that it's, for me, it's been evident that the biggest people in this movement are the least interested in everybody's story getting out. Or I don't know. It's really difficult for me.
Well,
to put
they're
this
interested in their strategy, their direction. You know, they have it all planned out. It's human nature to sit there and say, "Look, I know where to take this."
Yeah.
You know, but you're right. I mean, but what happens is you start to get snowblind after a while because you're only focused on what you think, what you believe, your research, whatever it may be. And if you don't have a continuous flow of input coming into the equation,
Right.
you're going to become myopic after a while.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, you have to also factor in that fame quotient. I did get a little tiny taste of that at TPV, and it's addictive and it's an infection, and I didn't like it. It's very alluring.
It's amazing how people succumb to celebrity, isn't it?
Oh my, I thought this is dangerous. I don't like this a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hey,
Well,
did you guys...
wisdom tells you that the more you know, the more there is to know. So if somebody thinks that they've got it all, well, you know that's not correct.
Right.
Right. That's right. Well, I was wondering if you guys wanted to finish up the show by talking a little bit about ISIS and September 11th coming. It seems like you're setting the table for the propaganda and expectations, inflicting that fear, and maybe a false flag coming our way.
Well, ISIS.
Go ahead.
Okay. I really only have one brief thing to say about ISIS, and that is that where I'm being led with that is that it's a ritual. This whole first of all, ISIS is. I mean, we talk about ISIS in terms of the British royal family and the things that the elites are wrapped up in terms of magic, and this stupid ice bucket thing that's going on. Is it just in the United States that people are pouring ice all over themselves?
It's part of the ritual.
It's part of the ritual. You are baptized. You are preparing yourself as a sacrifice.
That's right.
Cut it out. Cut it out.
Yeah, stop being an idiot.
Well, you know, the thing is, I don't support any of this stuff. It's all insane. If money could cure cancer, it would have been cured 25 years ago because there's been jillions of dollars dumped into that. And women get mad at me because I won't participate in any of that stuff. All it does is give more attention to the system that is killing us. And so, you know, any of this stuff, they're making millions of dollars. You know, I read something that said only 27% of the money that's going into that is actually going to research. And I'll bet you $1 it's not even that much.
Right.
Because they don't have to. It can still be a charitable organization and only give 1%.
Right.
So it is another con job on we the people. And people are participating in it.
Yeah, they don't want to solve cancer. That's not profitable.
Oh, of course not. It's insane. But why should we play the game?
Right.
Why should we go and run 10 miles and get people to pay so much a mile and all this? Why should we do all that? It is using up our precious imagination and creativity toward what end? A lie.
Exactly.
We are participating in the con job on us.
Right.
The insanity is so rife. I can hardly comprehend it. You know, it's just, and insanity is the correct word.
It's like the yellow ribbons on the back of the cars.
Right.
I support the troops.
Yeah.
You know? Nobody ever stops to think.
I support them. Bring them home.
Bring them home.
That's what Ron Paul said. What did President Paul say, you guys? Huh? How are you going to bring all our troops home? What are you talking? Same way I got them there. I'm going to turn them around.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm going to bring them home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And all of this excess military gear we've got, line it up on the border. Set it down there. We don't need it up here in our cities. Get it on that border. Get our guys down there and stop the leaks. No, it's done on purpose. It's absolutely done on purpose. Now, before we close down this thing, I've got two things that I made notes on that I wanted to mention. I don't know whether you know that this has to do with PC. An elementary girl was suspended from school because a person sneezed and she said, "Bless you."
Yeah, I read that.
Not God bless you, just bless you. And I did this yesterday in a store. I said, "Bless you" in a store really loud, because it's just something that we do. And everybody knows that when people talk about God, they usually mean that psychopath Yahweh Jehovah. I don't, and I make that very clear, but I don't even say God. I just say bless you. I can bless you. You can bless me. And then in college, threw a guy out of class for quote unquote God talk because he said bless you to someone that sneezed.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Are you serious?
No. This is insane. And we have got to stand up against this and do it anyway.
Yes.
And I do believe that the parents of the elementary girl should go to court with that.
Yep.
And I believe that the guy in college should go to court with that. And until we cost people money, they don't listen to us.
Right. That's insane.
We have to cost them money. Now, the other thing, which has nothing to do with PC really, is did you know that the Attorney General Holder, who it's almost a crime to say those two things together because, is, excuse me just a minute.
It's organized crime.
I had to cough. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is suing a city for not wanting a mosque.
It's not his business.
Well, a city should be able to vote on what they want in their city.
Exactly. 50 sovereign states and all of that.
If we don't want it, they can go somewhere else and get it. But my husband sent me a map of the United States from the youngconservatives.com, and it showed the secondary religions in our country, and it was the Christianity is supposed to be number one. Number two was Islam. Now, number one, I don't believe it, and number two, if that's true, we should be marching in the streets because Sharia law is horrific.
Yeah.
We are not even prepared to comprehend or think about that kind of thing in our country. That's why so much bad stuff is happening to us, because as white citizens of America, we were taught to be polite. We were taught to make peace. We were taught to take it on the chin sometimes and keep on going, and all of that stuff that we were taught to do, especially those of us that were reared in the South. It's really important. It's really important to think of people in the same way that you think of yourself. I can't imagine going out and doing something horrific. Well, I can't imagine you going out and doing something horrific. And yet that's what we're dealing with in our reality. There are beings who do not process things the same way we do because they are so entrained and programmed that they operate out of programs, not out of processing information, and they do things differently than us. That's why that's one of the biggest problems with our border being open is we're getting societies over here that are in no way like us.
This is basically social engineering toward a cultural revolution, which comes from the Frankfurt School, which is as old as the century, and it's still going on.
And it is an attack on white people.
Yeah, Western culture, absolutely. You bet they want it gone. So,
one thing I wanted to mention, whenever we have these conversations, we really have to look, at least in my opinion, to the root cause. And here's the root cause. The District of Columbia is a sovereign city-state.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's nothing to do with the Republic of the United States. So what we have is a foreign occupying force.
Right.
We are occupied.
That's right.
The nation is occupied by a foreign occupying force.
Mm-hmm.
So when people ask me, well, what do you mean a sovereign city-state, Mike? I said, well, it would be no different if we stuck the Congress, the White House, and the Supreme Court in North Korea, or if
That's right.
we stuck it someplace else. It is not part of the United States. So what's happening is you're being administered to, you're being quote unquote governed by an occupying force.
That's correct.
And
That
this
is right.
Right. And this is why we have the problems that we have. This is why the borders are not being enforced, because the foreign occupying force does not want to enforce the borders. They do not have a constitution. They have a corporate constitution. It's the Constitution of the United States of America, which is the corporation. It's not the Constitution for the United States of America, which is for the people.
Right.
Every corporation has to have a constitution. And what we have is a corporate government. It's United States Incorporated. They have a corporate constitution. It has been altered. We won't go into it in this show.
Right.
And so this is why there's total disregard for the Constitution and the laws and the Bill of Rights, is because this is not their document.
That's right. That's right. And that's why they ignore it, because it does not apply to them. They're a business.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. That's a wonderful point. That whole little encapsulated thing that you two just did right there is absolutely critical.
It's important that people understand that. They're sitting there and they're looking at the District of Columbia and the Congress and the Supreme Court and the White House. They are voting for an occupying force when they go to the voting booth every 4 years or every 2 years, whenever some election takes place.
Right.
Yep.
And they're all it's a theater stage.
Yes.
And so they're all the actors, and when the Democrats decide that they wear a certain outfit and a certain costume, and then that means the Republicans have to wear a different costume.
Right.
And then they change, and then the Republicans wear what the Democrats formerly wore. It's a theater. They're just playing. And when they get on TV and they smile and they say and they get upset and they call each other names and all that, that's BS. That's just that's a show. It's a theater.
It's a show.
It has nothing to do with anything. What has to do with it is what Mike said, which is it is a foreign company, a foreign country actually.
Right.
And they should be in Israel, not Korea, because that's what's running it. And all a person has to do is go to YouTube and look up AIPAC and take a look at that. Take a look at what our quote unquote leaders say. We will support Israel forever. It doesn't mean no matter what you do, we're going to support you. I'm going to tell you what, that's mind control and entrainment if I have ever seen it.
Yeah, and again, we're going right back to the Tavistock and the Frankfurt School with that one. Absolutely.
Right. And for the audience that does not understand what Pamela just referred to, we're talking about AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. They are a gigantic lobby, Israeli lobby, the biggest. It's just unbelievable. They run this country. You know, when people say to me, when our politicians go over and they pay homage to the Wailing Wall, they're paying homage to Zionism, they're paying homage to their masters. And I say to people, well, how come I don't see Benjamin Netanyahu come over here and place his hand on the Jefferson Memorial?
Yeah, there you go.
Or the Lincoln Memorial? How come I don't see him paying homage to the once great republic of the United States of America?
Yeah.
This is how hosed up it is.
Yes, and actually, I have said recently, I couldn't tell you what the context is now, but offhand, but I have said recently to somebody, do you have any idea how many of the United States public officials carry both Israeli and U.S. passports? And they actually said to be so. And I thought,
I know. That's on my list to talk about here. Do you know that Argentina just made it not possible to have dual membership now?
Good.
Dual citizenship, and they kicked out the Israeli dual citizenship, which I was very shocked about, because Argentina is supposed to be where the Nazis are and all of that. But, we have people, it's not like you or I, average Joe citizen, have dual citizenship. We're talking about the people that understand the secret things that are going on, the inside. These are people very high up in our government. And it is a conflict of interest. You
Right.
know, if I were president of RJ Reynolds and, you know, I also became a CEO of one of the other big Fortune 500 companies, they would probably tell me that was a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Because how could I do things,
Mm-hmm. Of
you
course
know?
they would. Yeah.
Of course they would.
Of course they would.
Well,
It
it's
is so
treason.
obvious. Well,
It
it
is
is treason.
treason, Mike.
It
It's
is
And that's
treason.
what, and people will say, how could you say to me, so? Really? You don't understand what's wrong with that?
right.
Yeah.
You don't understand that this is split loyalties and and oh, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. But they had no idea. I can't even remember who I was talking to at this point. But
Well, my research, the entire State Department is essentially dual Israeli-American
yeah,
citizenship.
yeah,
And
And
has been for a long time.
and it
yeah.
has been for a long time, and it is treason.
It
Yes.
is. Thank you. Yeah,
Yep.
and it should be. I mean, it's set up. It's set up to try and keep things clean, isn't it?
But see, the last time there was an election for president, I went on the air and I said, "Don't vote. Why play their game? It
Right.
doesn't mean anything. It absolutely has nothing to do with anything except you're playing their game."
Well, you're participating in
Everybody
organized crime.
You are.
everybody rearranges their day to go get the little sticker that says "I voted," and they pull a lever, and we already know that the elections are scams and they're rigged. I mean, it's
I know.
blatant in your face.
Right.
I know.
The guy that owns all the
Voting
voting
booth.
machines, yeah, he
I
said that he
know.
would do anything to get a Bush elected. I
Uh,
mean, my God, that's
I
like saying
know.
I rigged the whole thing. And then what about the court appointing a
Yeah.
president? Where
right.
is
Yeah.
that in our Constitution? Where
Right.
is that?
Right. Right.
You know,
Well, I have to
so
say,
so
Pamela,
everything's out of control.
it is. And I have to say, though, I was a delegate for Ron Paul, and I did it purely out of spite because I wanted to, feel like I could make some kind of statement. And so I was a main delegate for Ron Paul. And I will tell you right now that that weekend, which was, by the way, about 3 weeks after my house burned down, I was living in a hotel, but I felt like it was really important to go do that. The entire weekend we were there, the same attorney that won Bush the election over Al Gore with the whole hanging Chad thing was there the whole weekend to screw everything up, make sure that we couldn't get anything accomplished. So
Isn't that something?
he
No
was
surprise.
there all weekend long. We couldn't even get to a boat till about 9 o'clock the first night. So
Right. Well, folks, your government is a corporation.
there you
That's
go.
right.
There,
It's a
well,
business.
It's a business.
And so is every part of our government.
Yes.
yeah,
School systems are businesses. Our local cities are businesses. And if you don't believe it, go look them up on Dun and Bradstreet.
Your police
Very well.
departments, your courts,
That's right.
right,
they're there to drive revenue. They're revenue creating entities.
right,
That's right. And
exactly.
some of them even say that.
Yeah.
Was it the
So
department that says, you know, we're not coming out unless, you know, there's somebody dead and we'll write up the report. They don't come to
right.
protect you. They come to write up the report.
Right.
Well, there are people who are coming, at least trying to come up with some alternatives, some viable alternatives. One of those people is Michael Tellinger.
Yeah.
I try to always make sure I throw in the positive when we're talking about all this kind of stuff that needs desperately to be talked about. There's no doubt about it. But people are trying to come up with absolute alternatives, contributionism and no money and free energy and all of that stuff. And I realized recently, in the last couple of days, that my publisher in Germany is throwing this giant party in Germany to celebrate the opening of the German Ubuntu parties. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and you agree with what Tellinger's putting out there, local chapters, state chapters, country chapters of Ubuntu are popping up all over the place. And this is about contributing what you can to your community, you know, and receiving free energy in return, and really trying to start something completely different and money free. Money free.
It's a great alternative, it sounds like. I've contacted his people to get him on my show, and they
Mm-hmm.
said as soon as he gets back home,
Oh, good.
we can
Very
set a
good.
date. But right
Yeah.
now, you know, he's out of the country.
Yeah, he's
Uh,
been traveling for 6 months.
right? Yeah, yeah. I saw him somewhere yesterday, but yeah, I believe that everything, and I don't use the word believe, I know that and am aware that everything we've talked about actually is a very positive thing,
Mm-hmm.
because until we see how things really are,
Mm-hmm.
we cannot respond correctly.
I agree completely. I agree completely.
And until
Absolutely.
something crumbles, you can't build it back up.
But you guys are bringing some people in who really are, I mean, I'm very impressed with both your shows. You're bringing the people in who have solutions or are really telling it like it is, like John Lash and Michael Tellinger, and right? You guys are doing such a good job of bringing the truth and the solution, and not problem reaction solution, by the
Right,
way.
right.
And really trying to get the best of what's out there out in the American public. And that's not easy because we live in an electromagnetic concentration camp in the United States. There's a big block on information. It's, as far as I'm concerned, we're bound in the US, which is a term that I suppose could use some explanation. Pamela is probably better at explaining those kinds of things than I am. But yes, we are blocked and bound and gagged in the
Yep,
US. So
absolutely.
the fact that you guys are getting this kind of stuff out is a sign that the dam's bursting.
Yes, it is. It is. I appreciate you saying that.
Mm-hmm,
You know,
absolutely.
yeah, I had your friend Mark McCandlish on.
Oh, did you have Mark on? Very
Oh,
good.
we had a great time, and he wants to come back too, so we'll have him on again in a couple of months.
He's
But
wonderful.
the thing is that everybody has part of the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a part of it. And I don't know what part you have. You don't know what part I have until we start talking with each other.
Yes.
Until we say, oh, this is where what my life experience has said, or I have access to lifetimes that you don't have, maybe. And you
Yeah.
have access to lifetimes I don't have. And once wisdom is gained, it's ours forever. So we can
Right.
tap into that. And I have memory of being a Gnostic. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether I'm going to bring that up with John Lash or not, because I don't know how he feels about past lives. But I absolutely have memories of that. And I
Right.
absolutely know that we were not Christian.
Right. And I
They
think,
killed me.
yeah.
Literally, they physically killed me and called us heretics and all kind. And they were foaming at the mouth, angry. I mean, they
Yeah.
were so hyped up. So, there's a lot of misinformation, but if you can pull from your own experience, then
Mm-hmm.
you can know inside yourself. And that's where we can come up with solutions for today,
Right.
is
Right.
Well,
from inside ourselves, if we know what's really going
I'm
on.
jealous you got John
Me too.
because I emailed him. It was crickets.
I know,
But
I
that's,
got it too. You know who got him
uh,
for us?
oh,
David, my husband.
Okay.
no, no. You see,
I
this is
had
how,
tried for 3 months.
I'm
yeah,
looking
this is
forward
how we
to
operate,
it.
though. We can like shoot people toward each other.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, we
that's
do.
kind of how that works. So
Yeah,
that's the blessing right there. That's the blessing.
absolutely.
So look,
Absolutely.
I was thinking, in case everything fails, I'd like to know where I could sign up for the breakaway civilization.
Ah, I think there's one in South Africa, right?
Right.
Tellinger seems to have actual free energy at his, that's actually there and available. I don't know. I think that there needs to be a circle of protection around that man. That's for sure. There
Yeah.
probably is. Um, so there's that.
Right.
But
Right. Well, we're
otherwise, I
not.
don't.
Go ahead, Kara.
No, no, that's it. That's the
Well,
only thing.
I lived in Haiti for a year when I
Mm,
was very young, and we had electricity for 20 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day, and we never knew when we would have it. And I'm going
yeah,
to tell you something, we are not ready for that here in this world over here.
No.
yeah,
We're just not ready for it. It's very hard. Your
yeah,
whole life gets situated around when this electricity is going to come on. And
yeah,
you're
yeah.
very, very organized and detailed, and we're just not that way here.
Right.
we,
Right,
we're so used to things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm
right,
not saying that's incorrect in any way. I'm just saying that we're going to be very off balance if we're not aware of what can happen. And
right,
that's why we're talking, and that's why people come up and say, we need to be prepared, we need to be prepared. Well, I'm a prepper, not because I live out of fear, which I absolutely do not. I do
right,
that so that that part is taken care of. Now I can deal with something else.
Right.
right. And let's not forget how resourceful human beings are. When
Absolutely.
the last time there was a hurricane in Manhattan, I had just dropped off my son at college. It was not a happy moment for me. There was a hurricane coming, but he wanted to go to school. And he's at NYU. And so then a couple of days later, there were pictures coming out of New York of students at NYU who had figured out how to charge their cell phones using, I don't know, potatoes and string or something. It was amazing. And they had themselves set up on the streets so people could come up and charge cell. I mean,
Yeah.
I was just blown away at the human capacity for getting around things.
One of the things I talk about when I talk about how amazing we are as human beings is that we problem solve.
Yep.
We absolutely problem solve. So when we're talking to the young people, we have to say, yes, Fukushima happened.
Right.
Yes, we've got, continent-sized plastic islands out in the ocean. Yes, we do. But some human being knows how to fix that.
That's right.
And I absolutely know that. And we do not have to wait for our alien brothers to do it. And we do not have to wait for Muhammad or Jesus to come and fix it all. We
Right.
have that ability inside ourselves. Why? Because we are amazing human beings.
Yes, we are magicians. I mage in. Yes?
That's
I
true.
mage in. Imagine.
That's true.
That's
That
my
is true.
mantra now.
It's
That's my
it
mantra.
is a powerful, powerful, powerful tool.
Mm-hmm. So
Well, we
Mike,
are up against 2 hours,
Good.
yeah.
and
Good,
it
she
was
said. Good.
it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we should make a habit of it. I think you should make it an actual program.
I think so too. Maybe monthly.
Yeah. Well, I'm up for it totally. Just let me know
That's
what you
fine.
want, how you want to handle it.
It's a lot more relaxed because when you bring other guests on, you're not. I hope my guests don't take this the wrong way, but it's not as relaxed
Yeah.
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
when you're amongst friends.
Exactly. I actually have a friend in Germany. I have a friend in Germany who started doing this a couple of years ago with a friend of his. And they started off, they call it daily energy, I think is how it translates.
Mhm.
Anyway, they started off with like 30 minutes. And as they went along, I think once a week, maybe it got to be, they're up to 3 hours at a time, and it's the most popular show he has.
There you go.
Wonderful.
They just
Wonderful.
really, people just really look forward to seeing these two sit there and talk and get the newspapers out and, laugh at society, laugh at civilization, and bring up the news that's not so laughable, and, just talk about everything that's going on. So it's actually something that people appear to be needing to hear.
Right. It's unfiltered dialogue.
Right. And that's important, Michael, because people are so sick of the canned stuff.
Yeah.
Yes,
Speaking
exactly.
in a certain way and not being real.
Right.
My listeners deserve the best I can give of the real me. And that's
Right.
what I do every time is
Mhm.
is give the real me. What else could I give? Why would I try to give something that I'm not? That
Right.
is so insane, and I don't want to contribute to the insanity. I
Right.
want to I can just kind of see it in my mind's eye. I want to push some of the insanity aside and try to give room for something to come through that might be sane.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I always remember Michael Tsarian talking about the word sane coming from the same root as sanitize.
Mhm.
And, we wash everything. We wash our clothes and our sheets and our cars, and we wash everything except, do we ever sanitize our brain, our
Right.
memory, our thoughts? Do we ever sanitize our emotions? Do we ever
Right.
cleanse ourselves? How about our auric body? How much crap are we carrying around in our energy field?
Right.
Cleaning is
Lots.
something we should do. To sanitize is very important. And you cannot be sane and be
Mhm.
filled up with a bunch of crap. You can't do it.
Right. Yeah, some
Well,
people refer to that as psychic hygiene, which is kind of an odd term, or spiritual hygiene.
Yeah, both of those
But
are correct.
yeah.
well, you're two of
Sorry,
the
Mike.
sanest people I know.
What?
Me too. I agree.
What? Well,
I
it sure
agree.
is. It's very enjoyable to do this. So if you want to make a series out of it, I'm certainly game for it.
All right, we'll do that.
You just let me know.
All right, ladies. So I think what with here we're like I said, a little over 2 hours now. I'll do some editing, get it down to about the 2 hour mark, and I'll try to get it out within a week.
Michael and Pamela, you're two of my favorite people in the whole wide world.
Same here. Right back
Thank
at
you,
you.
Cara. Right back at you. Right.
I'm
Okay.
really
Well,
glad.
we'll talk
Okay.
to you all later. Take
Bye-bye.
care
Okay,
of
Pamela.
yourselves. Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
And that concludes our roundtable with Cara St. Louis and Pamela Tartar, and we hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. Cara's online magazine can be found at vortexcourage.me, and her current book, The Sun Thief, can be purchased at amazon.com. Pamela's shows can be listened to at puremomentum.net, and please consider becoming a subscriber and keep the truth flowing. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and for visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. Also, please take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, by heading to laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.